This thing off. All right, so a couple of prayer requests we have. Pray for Warren. They just took him to the hospital just a little while ago. Come on. I guess AMC, I have no idea. Yeah. Warren has seizures a lot, and he was having one. So. Anyway, pray for him, and I guess we'll know something after a while, but pray for him. Got a lot of folks out sick and stuff, so. Anybody else? Prayer requests? All of them? Yes, ma'am. How many have unsaved loved ones? We'd pray for them. Also, Jill got a message this morning. The Lancaster trip, we just didn't have enough people to do it, so they're going to go ahead and cancel that. So I guess if you turned in money, they'll get it back to you. If not, thanks for the donation. Yeah, remember the Rittenhour family. Keep Janet lifted up in your prayer. Pray for Bob. Keep him lifted up as he goes for surgery tomorrow. Talked to him yesterday. He was upbeat, but yeah, I'm sure this is weighing on him pretty heavy. And thank God he broke that arm that he had surgery on, not the other arm. He'd be in a world of hurt, wouldn't he? Anybody else? Prayer requests, praises? Yes, ma'am. Okay. All right. So let's pray for you as you go for that. Yes, ma'am. All right, let's remember that. That cancer stuff is bad, isn't it? Someone else? We have several folks at church that are sick. Lots of folks, actually, that are sick. And all the kids, it seems like all the kids are sick. They're out of school for a while, and they go back and get sick. And then they're out of school for a while and go back and get sick, don't they? It's like a vicious cycle. So remember them and their families. That keeps everybody out of church when their kids are sick. Anybody else? All right. Who'd like to open us up in prayer this morning? Anybody? Thank you, Larry. Amen. All right, now who didn't get the handout from last week or so? The 10 plagues? Anybody need one? All right, hold your hands up. Jacob will pass them out to you. Thank you, brother. Make sure I got one here. Huh? Yeah, there should be plenty of them. Should be plenty. I got one extra if you need it. All right, we're in Exodus chapter number 7. We're getting ready to hit these plagues. All of these plagues that we're going to talk about, they deal with... I got one more. I got one more. I made 85 of them, so that means some of y'all done ate these things. All right. So we're going to be down in verse number 8 here in just a moment as we begin. This little 10 plagues, these next couple chapters are going to roll really fast. And we might do like a bunch of chapters in one morning, so just so that you know. But all of these plagues, it's important for us to understand what God was doing and why God was doing it. Remember last week we talked about the fact that all of this stuff parallels the end time, doesn't it? It certainly does. And God brings all these things to pass to bring deliverance to His people. Well, when we look at these gods and what these gods represent, you're also going to see a parallel in our day and what's coming in the future. Because when the salt and the light is taken off of this earth, which is us, when the salt and light's taken off, the people are going to revert back to religion, paganism, paganistic religion. All forms of paganistic religion have one thing in common. They all worship the same God. All of them. All religion worships the same God. That's the devil. Y'all understand that, right? The difference between religion and us, we're not religious. We have a relationship with the Father through the Son. We're family. That's different. Christianity is a religion. Being a believer is a relationship. It's a whole different ballgame. Everybody got that? So Christianity, there's all kinds of Christianity. There's Catholic Christianity, which worships the devil, right? People call themselves Christians that are Mormons and Jehovah's Witnesses. It's the devil. They have one God. So understand that. So when the truth is taken off the earth, when the salt and light's taken off, the world is going to divert to a pluralistic pagan worship system. But it's all going to come under the auspices of one world religion. That is, everybody's just sincere in their religion and nobody bashes anybody else's religion. Right now, there's only two things that keep the Antichrist from coming to power. One of them, obviously, is the church, the salt and the light. We keep the Antichrist from coming to power. The other is Islam. Islam is the only other religion in the world that will not bow to another God. And so Islam, when you read the Bible, is going to be destroyed. Ezekiel 38 tells us all about the destruction. Thank you, ma'am. I have plenty more if anybody needs them. So it tells us all about the destruction of Islam in the last days. And so all the Islamic armies are going to be defeated. The Islamic nations are in destruction. And therefore Islam is no longer a thing. It's a mute thing. Which brings about the power vacuum that brings about the revived Roman Empire, which brings about the Antichrist, right? And so we talked about that ad nauseum in the past. But what I want you to realize is that when all these things take place, when they transpire, people are going to gather together regionally, economically, geographically, and they're going to worship their gods. And they're going to worship whatever they've been worshiping their whole life. There's still churches going to be open everywhere. There's still synagogues going to be open everywhere. All forms of religion is going to still be going on everywhere. But there's going to be a difference. And the difference is that if you're a Christian, you can also be a Muslim, or you can also be a Hindu, or you can also be a Taoist, or what have you. It's going to be a mix of religion, because it's all paganism. When you have one God, listen to me very carefully. When you have one God, you have unity. Today in the church, we who are saved have unity. There's only one Savior. There's one way to heaven. We're saved. We're looking for Jesus. We're longing for home. We know we're saved. Come on, right? Am I right? There's unity there. We may disagree on some little things that don't matter, like, how often we should do the Lord's Supper, or which is the best Bible translation, or whatever. We might disagree about those things. They're nothing. Those are nothing. Jesus is everything. When you look at what hates us, who hates us? False Christianity hates us. Islam hates us. The Hindus hate us. The Buddhists hate us. Everybody hates us. Why? Because there's a difference between all the world's religion and us. We who are saved say there's only one way. That is Jesus. He is the way, the truth, and the life. End of story. Religion says you need to worship your God. Your God is the best God, but truly not possibly the only way. Because that's your way, but there are others who are on another way. How many of y'all have heard that? Yeah, that's religion. And so that idea of religion, that universality of religion is what's going to be prevalent. When that becomes prevalent, then people are going to start once again making images and statues, and they're going to have tangible things to try to show that their God is the best God, the greatest God, the strongest God. This is what happened in the ancient world. In the ancient world, when you deal with Egyptians, you come through any culture in the ancient world, They all had statues and medallions they wore, and pictures and forms and shapes and drawings on their homes and their barns and everything else. And they drew the images of their God that they worshiped. And so their God that they worshiped was the strongest God of their region. And so as we study these, as we go through this, you're going to find one God is going to be the frog god down by the water, right? And so the people who live down by the water would worship that God. That's the great, that's their strong God. And then others, the God of crops and the God of cattle. Well, they don't live right by the river. They live off from the river, and that's their God, and that's the God they worship the most. That's the God that they need the most to take care of their farm stuff. Makes sense to y'all? And so when we come to the last days, this is what the world is going to divert to. And then there are going to be lying signs and wonders. I alluded to this last week, and I want you to get this. When the Antichrist comes to power, he's going to come to power by lying signs and wonders. And so there are going to be the ancient gods returning. What are the ancient gods? The ancient gods are the giants. The ancient gods are the angelic-looking beings, the demonic-looking creatures, the ugly creatures, the weird-looking creatures. All of these things are coming back to the earth. We are starting to see it happen even now, are we not? Look at what's taking place now. What used to be considered, oh, you're a wacko if you say there's a UFO. Well, guess what? Now, they're everywhere. Mainstream media covers it. UAPs, they're not even called UFOs anymore because UFOs, you're a wacko. A UAP, well, you're not a wacko. Well, guess what? That stuff is very demonic, and it's coming back to this earth. And when we're gone, that stuff is once again going to come to a prevalence. That's how this parallels in the last days. When you look at the last days and you look at the 2 witnesses that come and you look at the 144,000 that get saved, they're going to be preaching the gospel of the kingdom. And so what they are doing is preaching against all of this stuff, all of these gods, all of this imagery. The 2 witnesses are going to be killed, aren't they? And then God brings them back to life. God's going to show that He ultimately has the power over all the gods, all the demons, and all the evil. And He does it in stages and steps until Jesus steps foot on the earth. When Jesus steps foot on the earth, it's over. The mountains, the earth separates, and Jesus walks across into the eastern gate, just like the sea separated, and God's people walked across on dry land into their safety. You understand this? So these things parallel. And we're to study them, and the Jews especially are to study this because it will show them the way of deliverance in the tribulation. In the tribulation period, don't follow after the gods of the Egyptians, because the gods of the Egyptians are the gods of the world. And you'll see it as we go through it. Everybody still with me? All right, let me begin. We're going to start with the very first one, and that we find in verse number 8. And understand this. As we read this, you're going to see that the devil and his minions, his enchanters, his sorcerers, they have the same power. They demonstrate the same power up to a certain point. And then they have no more power. And I want you to realize this, the devil will still do everything he can to deceive you and to destroy you, but God's power is greater. Greater is He that's in you than he that's in this world. The Lord spake unto Moses, verse number 8, chapter 7 of Exodus. The Lord spake unto Moses and to Aaron, saying, when Pharaoh shall speak unto you, saying, show a miracle for you, then thou shalt say unto Aaron, take thy rod, cast it before Pharaoh, it shall become a serpent. And Moses and Aaron went in unto Pharaoh, and they did so as the Lord had commanded. And Aaron cast down his rod before Pharaoh and before his servants, and it became a serpent. Then Pharaoh also called the wise men and the sorcerers, the wise men and sorcerers and the magicians of Egypt. Now notice this. They are 3 separate things, and yet they are very much together. The wise men and sorcerers are religious leaders, and they both have the context in their name meaning to whisper or to write a spell, an incantation. A magician is a horoscopist. And what they are is they're the ones that draw magic lines or circles. They go from the astrological signs is what they go by. The zodiac. The zodiac is nothing new. It's ancient. It's not anything that we should ever have anything to do with as a Christian. I don't care if you're a Libra, a Leo, or a loser. It doesn't matter. You stay away. You stay away from that stuff. That stuff is incantation. It's sorcery. And don't open yourself up to the wiles of the devil. Amen. Stay away from it. So Pharaoh called the wise men the sorcerers. Now the magicians of Egypt, they also did in like manner with their enchantments. The word enchantments is this. It means to have secret knowledge and to demonstrate in a mystical fashion. We still have people today who believe that they have secret knowledge. Knowledge outside of what is the norm. Knowledge that comes from the light. I want you to understand something. The light is not the light of the Bible. It's not Jesus the light, but it comes from Lucifer, the light bearer. And we have got to understand this. Folks, listen, if anybody ever tries to get you to join the Masonic Lodge, which will eventually become, want you to be a Shriner, the Eastern Star, all of that, run from that. It may just seem like a fun little fraternity, but it is based upon Lucifer being the light bearer. And we do not look for light outside of the Bible, outside of God. We look for the truth that's already been given to us because the Holy Spirit of God lives in us. We have all of God, and God has given us all we need to know. Everybody with me? And when they ask for more light, they're asking Lucifer to give them more understanding, more light. And in actuality, they're asking for enchantment, secret knowledge, knowledge that goes beyond the human norm, and it's in a mystical or a magical fashion. It's evil. And I've got friends that are in that. I've got people I love that are in that. People that listen every Sunday that are in that. And that's fine. They can do what they want to do. They're going to give an account themselves. But it's my job to warn. Yeah, it's my job to warn against this stuff. Amen? But I'll love them just the same. Treat them just the same. I will never, I tell them the truth. That's it. Okay? Everybody with me on that? It is the same thing. It's ancient mystery religion, which comes right down to Egypt, which comes back to before the very flood itself into the ancient world. For they cast down every man his rod, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. And he hardened Pharaoh's heart, that he hearkened not unto them, as the Lord had said. So here's that first miracle. And the very first thing that happens here, they cast down this serpent, or the stick, and it becomes a serpent. The magicians do the same thing, right? And so this is not a judgment that God is going to show Pharaoh. He used it to harden Pharaoh's heart. He told Moses, he told Aaron that he was going to harden Pharaoh's heart. And no matter what they did, remember he was supposed to do this and then throw the stick down, right? And for those who were innocent, those who were pure, those who loved the Lord, that was pretty amazing to them. But for those who worshiped the mystical, the magical, the enchanters, it was nothing. They had the power to do this too. And it's a spiritual power. And it can be done either by good or by evil. And so all their little rods became snakes, and Moses' snake ate their snakes, showing that Moses' power was greater than their power. Understand this. Now, I didn't jot this one down because the Nile River turning to blood is really the one we want to talk about, about the gods. But they worshiped the snake gods. They worshiped weird things in ancient Egypt. Matter of fact, in the early part of Egypt, they worshiped mice. They thought mice were the greatest things ever. And they killed every snake, and they killed all the cats because they worshiped mice. And then suddenly they realized that all these mice that they let share their food, live in their hair, live in their beds with them, were giving them diseases. So what happened was, according to history, how true it is, I don't know. I don't think anybody really does now. But apparently there was a large population of cats that came in, killed all these mice. And so then the snakes, they quit killing the snakes. The snakes came back. The snakes killed the mice. The cats killed the mice, and some of their diseases went away. So they worshiped cats, and they worshiped snakes. And so they had a god that they made out of cats and a god they made out of snakes. And so when Moses' snake ate their snake, it was just a little symbol. It's just a little symbol saying that I have more power than you have. Everybody got that, right? And so it's just weird stuff. But anyhow, so then later in Egyptian culture, and you find that now prevalent in the pyramids and all that, they have a lot of images of snakes and a lot of images of cats. Why? Because the cat god and the snake god drove away the rat god and the mouse god, because they used to think the rat god and the mouse god was mighty, but apparently the snake god and the cat god were stronger than the mouse god and the cat. You get it. Crazy, right? All right. So with all that being said, he used that to harden Pharaoh's heart. So he put the stick down thinking that Pharaoh's going to be amazed like the Jews were amazed. Pharaoh's like, hey boys, show this idiot what you can do. But he was not expecting that. But even so that happened, God hardened his heart. Y'all listen to me. Now, there's a lot of people who try to take God hardening Pharaoh's heart and put it in a Calvinistic slant. See, Pharaoh couldn't be saved because God hardened his heart. He's destined for hell. You're putting apples and oranges together. Pharaoh was in charge of Egypt. Egypt had to let the people go. And Egypt had to let the people go with great wealth. This was a God thing to let an entire nation go. It's not has anything to do with one man's individual salvation. Hopefully you understand that. You're smart enough to discern that, aren't you? All right. So Calvinists will bring that up. So just so that you know. Now, let's talk about the water becoming blood. Now, here's the big one. The Nile River is about to be turned to blood. This goes against the Egyptian god Apis, which is the bull god who represented the fertility of the Nile. Hapi, or Hapi, I don't know how you pronounce it, which is the god of annual flooding. And Osiris, whom the Nile River was his bloodstream, were drawn. How many of y'all ever looked at the back of the dollar bill and you've got the little triangle with the eye in it? That's the all-seeing eye of Osiris. That's another name for Satan. He sees it all. And the Nile River was the bloodstream of Satan. Satan's bloodstream. Because our country was founded by Masons and it's a Masonic symbol. There you go. Anyway, it's all looking for more knowledge and all that. Understand that, all right? I don't have time to go into that today. I will get into it another day. But nevertheless, the Nile River was considered the lifeblood of Osiris, Satan. And so it was turned to blood. This was considered not that big of a deal by the magicians who had the same power to do it. After all, it represents the devil. The devil's the one that gives them power, and the devil can certainly do some great things, right? Here it is, verse number 14 down through verse number 25. And the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh's heart is hardened. He refuseth to let the people go. Get thee unto Pharaoh in the morning. Lo, he goeth out into the water, and thou shalt stand by the river's brink against the rod, I'll speak here in a minute, and the rod which was turned to a serpent shalt thou take in thine hand. Now, think about this. This is important. That stick now has swallowed up the other three snakes, right? These are not just any snakes. This is a viper. This is a poisonous snake. It'll bite you, and when it bites you, what comes out of you? Blood and poison, right? And so there's some imagery here and some things that the Egyptians would put two and two together that you and I, we don't even think this way. To us, it's Moses with a stick. To the Egyptians, this is that stick that ate the other sticks that has power in it. It has good and evil in it. Because the good stick, if Moses is good, ate the three, which is evil. And so the good stick now has evil in it, or the evil stick has good in it. Does that make sense? And so they looked at everything in a dualistic sense. They were dualistic in their thinking. We don't even think that way. To us, it's Moses and a stick. To them, there's a dualistic religious purpose that we don't really fathom. Just try to keep that in your mind. And thou shalt say unto him, the Lord God of the Hebrews hath sent me unto thee, saying, let my people go, and they may serve me in the wilderness. And behold, hitherto thou wouldest not hear. Thus saith the Lord, in this thou shalt know that I am the Lord. Behold, I will smite with the rod that is in mine hand upon the waters which are in the river, and they shall be turned to blood. So just the river is turned to blood. How many of y'all watched Charlton Heston and every piece of water turned to blood? Psh, wrong answer. Just the devil's vein. Okay? And the fish that is in the river shall die, and the river shall stink, because it's hot, and blood in the heat stinks. And it turns what color? What color does blood turn when it comes out of your body? No. What does it? Black. When it starts to decompose, it's definitely black, thick and stinky. All right? And the Egyptians shall loathe to drink the water of the river. No joke. It's pretty nasty, isn't it? We had a well. I was telling somebody the other day, we were talking about wells. Somebody has a well problem. I can't remember who it was. And we were talking about wells. Our well at our house back in Raleigh Springs was 10 feet deep because we lived right on the river bottom. But in the summer, dry river would dry up. We still had water, but it tasted like fish. It was weird. It was nasty in the summertime when it dried up. But anyway, that's another story. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying unto Aaron, take thy rod and stretch out thy hand upon the waters of Egypt, upon their streams, upon their rivers, upon their ponds. So just the water. Now, I want you to understand this. The rivers and the ponds, do you know where the rivers and the ponds came from? These are offshoots of the Nile River. And ponds are the basins of water that gather. They're like for feeding animals. The water comes from the Nile. They're not you ever seen your vein? It's not one line, is it? It has offshoots, right? Y'all have seen veins and stuff, right? Have y'all with me this morning? All right. So this is what it's talking about. All the little offshoots and the little ponds that are there to feed the cattle, they're going to turn into blood. And that they may become blood, and that there may be blood throughout all the land of Egypt, both in vessels of wood and vessels of stone. Whatever you took out of the Nile would turn to blood. Now, if you had wells dug, that's different. But whatever you took out of the Nile River was going to turn to blood. This is very important that you understand the context of this. And Moses and Aaron did so as the Lord commanded, and he lifted up the rod and smote the waters that were in the river in the sight of Pharaoh, in the sight of his servants, and all the waters that were in the river were turned to blood. So all the waters that were in the river, came out of the river, were from the river, turned into blood. And the fish that was in the river died, and the river stank, and the Egyptians could not drink the water of the river. And there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt, because that river is the lifeblood of Egypt. Okay? And the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments. Stop. So if all the water turned to blood, how could the Egyptians do that too? Right? So they had basins of water that came from wells. That's not unusual. When they brought the water to the enchanters, they touched them with sticks and they turned to blood too. The idea of an enchanter is this. They said some words, they said some spells, they called upon the knowledge that came outside of the truth. It comes from Lucifer, the light bearer. It comes from Osiris himself. And that water was turned to blood. Just like the Nile was turned to blood. And so what's Pharaoh going to do? Psh. Why? Because ultimately, as the Nile flows, what's it going to do? It's going to cleanse itself. It's full of blood now, but it's going to ultimately cleanse itself. Just give it a few days, it'll clear up. Drink from the well, boys. Doesn't really matter. Are y'all with me? So understand this concept now. Now watch what happens. What verse did I leave off on? 22. And the magicians of Egypt did so with their enchantments, and Pharaoh's heart was hardened, neither did he hearken unto them as the Lord had said. And Pharaoh turned and went unto his house, neither did he set his heart to this also. And all the Egyptians digged round about the river for water to drink, and they could not drink of the water of the river. And 7 days were fulfilled after that the Lord had smitten the river. In the book of Revelations, there's something coming out of the heavens. It's called wormwood. It's going to ruin most of the water. And yet people's hearts are still going to be hardened. Am I right or am I wrong? Oh yeah. Let's keep on going. Y'all still with me? The next one is the plague of frogs, chapter 8. If you got questions, stop me now. So the first little test, those enchanters did the same thing. The second one was the first miracle. I mean, it's a miracle that the waters turned to blood. Do you agree? But the enchanters, they could do the same thing by the power of Satan. They couldn't do it in the scale. They couldn't prove they could do it in the scale because God had already done it in the whole massive scale. All they had was little basins of water. Come on. Now comes the plague of frogs. The Egyptian god Hapi and Hecht, who had the head of a frog, and were related to fertility, were judged. Fertility, not just fertility in humans, but all fertility. Understand, by the Nile River, and in the river basin was some of the most lush, green, fertile fields in all the history of the world. They grew more crops, the best crops, and they used, this is interesting, the frogs were not in the river, but the frogs were in the offshoots of the river. And the frogs were also in the ponds. And they worshiped the frogs. So they would put little bowls of water out around their houses. And the frogs could lay their eggs in these stagnant pools of water. And they worshiped these frogs. They were worshiping another deity. They were worshiping a demon or two demons. But by bowing down to the frogs, and they would give the frogs bugs and give the frogs worms, they were making a sacrifice to the image to make the god happy, the demon happy. Does that make sense? How many of y'all have read in the Bible that there's coming a time in the end, in the tribulation, of the locust? Do you know, guess what the number one food was to give to a frog? Yeah, how'd you guess? You're pretty smart, ain't you? They catch them locusts, give them to the frog. They were bullfrogs. They weren't little, they were like monstrous frogs here. Everybody with me? All right. So this is a judgment against these gods that had frog heads, that these people had frogs in their homes, frogs on their patio, frogs in their yard. They built special ponds just to have frogs in them, and fed these frogs all these locusts, fed them all types of bugs that they could catch. And they would actually harvest and have cages of bugs in order to give the frogs bugs. Is that not unusual? Yeah. So notice this. And the Lord spake to Moses, Go unto Pharaoh and say unto him, Thus saith the Lord, Let my people go, that they may serve me. And if thou refuse to let them go, behold, I will smite all thy borders with frogs. You're going to have more frogs than you can shake a stick at. So think about that. I can't even imagine that. I don't know what being around a bunch of frogs looks like. I used to go frog gigging. I like to fry up some frog legs. They're pretty good. Dip them in some buttermilk and flour and fry them. They're good. They hop all over the pan till they're good Yeah, you got to put a lid on them things. But they're good eating. Tastes like chicken. Tastes like froggy chicken. But I've never been around a whole bunch of frogs. I don't know if they make a mess. I don't know if they're slimy. I don't know. They stink? Maybe. I don't have any idea. Yeah, I've never been around that many frogs to know, so I have no idea. But their whole borders are filled up with frogs. And the rivers shall bring forth frogs abundantly, which shall go up and come into thine house. So obviously, can we say obviously, the Nile has flowed and it has cleansed itself from the blood and the stench? There is a little time that has transpired. It's not like you watch on the Ten Commandments and the next morning Charlton Heston goes back in. There's a little bit of time that's taken place. And so the water is now clear, and apparently the frogs are back in abundance, and now God is going to go boom with the frogs. And they're everywhere. And unto the bedchamber and upon thy bed, and into the house of thy servants, upon thy people. There's so many frogs, they're just hanging out on you. Into thy ovens. You can't even bake bread. There's frogs in there. That boggles my mind. And into thy house and into thy kneading troughs. You can't even make dough. For all the frogs jumping into the kneading trough. That just... And it's just like the locusts in the tribulation, isn't it? Oh, yeah. And the frogs shall come up both on thee and upon thy people and upon all thy servants. The Lord spake unto Moses, saying unto Aaron, stretch forth thy hand with thy rod over the streams, over the rivers, over the ponds, and cause frogs to come up on the land of Egypt. And Aaron stretched out his hand over the waters of Egypt, and the frogs came up and covered the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantments. They brought more frogs. Now, how would you know? How would you know that they actually did it? Unless they went, poof, poof, frog. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how that would happen, but there was a way that they either did that or made it appear that they did that, right? And so they did so and brought up frogs upon the land of Egypt, as if they needed to do that. Didn't they have enough? And Pharaoh called for Moses and Aaron and said, entreat the Lord that he may take away the frogs from me and from my people. I will let the people go that they may do sacrifice unto the Lord. Now, here's the very first time that Pharaoh yields a little bit. Apparently, Pharaoh was not fond of having frogs in his bread dough. Frog tracks everywhere. Kermit was king, right? And so, but obviously, this had bothered him. But God, once again, is going to harden his heart. It's not time yet. The people are just learning the power of God. Remember, the enchanters did it the same thing. He didn't go to the enchanters and say, get rid of them. Even Pharaoh acknowledged, go to your God, and ask him to take away these frogs. Am I right? Yeah. So look what happened. Moses said unto Pharaoh, glory over me when I shall entreat for thee and for thy servants and for thy people to destroy the frogs from thee and from thy house, that they may remain in the river only. To glory over me has the idea of make sure you acknowledge to everyone the truth, basically. So when you're asking me to go to God to remove the frogs, make sure you remember to tell the people, I went to God to remove the frogs. It wasn't me, it was God actually that did it, but you need to acknowledge this. And so there is a personal thing here, but it's not that personal. Remember what Pharaoh said, I don't know you and I don't know your gods. I don't know you and I don't know this Lord you're talking about. Now he's acknowledging at least, obviously, you have this God. But it was important that he acknowledged Moses. Moses was important in Egypt before he was cast out. Y'all remember that, right? And now Moses is back. Moses is the greatest deliverer. He's the greatest king there. There are some scholars that say Moses had the rightful heir to become the next Pharaoh, not whoever took the Pharaoh position. I don't know whether that's true or not. I don't think there's any way we in our modern time could actually know that whether that's true or not. But it makes sense that he would at least have to be acknowledged by Pharaoh, because Pharaoh paid him no attention with the stick. Did he? No, you guys do it. I'm done with this. He didn't even acknowledge Moses or Aaron at anything. He's at least acknowledging. This is starting to be a change. There's going to be a pattern here now. There's going to be more acknowledgement and more hardening of the heart. Just like in the tribulation. Listen to me, guys. In the tribulation, there's going to be judgment after judgment after judgment. And each judgment, people are going to say they acknowledge God, but as soon as the judgment is over, they go right back to a hard heart. They'll even cry out to the mountains to fall on them, but they still go back to a hard heart. You get all that? Everybody with me on these on the steps? All right. And he said, tomorrow, and he said, be it according to thy word, that thou mayest know that there is none like unto the Lord, our God. And the frogs shall depart from thee, and from thy houses, and from thy servants, and from thy people, and they shall remain in the river only, which is good. Why? So what happened to all the frogs? Who eats frogs? Who eats frogs? Bass, fish. Fish eat frogs. Oh yeah. You ever use a little hopper to bass fish? Anybody bass fish? You put the little hopper on, throw it across the lily ponds, you reel it in. Yeah, they're about that big. And them fish will see that frog popping across the lily pads and come up and get that frog. Yeah. Topwater bait. Yep. Don't y'all fish? Y'all poor sad people. Y'all are missing out on life. Y'all need to get busy. All right. So they're going to be in the river only. They will naturally be disposed of. And Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh. And also, why is that important? Your gods are going to be eaten. Your gods ain't nothing. This image of God, you have them all over your house. You worship and you worship this frog god. All they are is fish food. Your God's fish food. How would you like for somebody to tell you that? Your God's nothing but fish food. Wouldn't that offend you? Absolutely. So Moses and Aaron went out from Pharaoh, and Moses cried unto the Lord because of the frogs which he had brought against Pharaoh. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses, and the frogs died out of the houses, out of the villages, and out of the fields. And they gathered them together upon heaps. So the ones that were out there, all these big old hopping heaps of frogs, they stank. Do you notice something back to back with both this and the blood? The stench, the stink. What else is coming to this earth? Fire, brimstone, a stench. During the tribulation, this earth is going to stink. Let me help you out. We don't think about this stuff, do we? The earth is going to stink for all the death and all the destruction that's going to come upon it. These are all images. These are all pictures. And for the Jews in the tribulation, as they're living through this and they're reading their Bible, they will not help but to see these similarities and know deliverance is coming. Deliverance is coming. Deliverance is coming. Is that not cool? All right. So all these frogs piled up. They stunk. The ones that went back into the river, they're fish food. And the Lord did according to the word of Moses. Frogs died, so forth. Villages, they stank. Verse 15. When Pharaoh saw that there was respite, he hardened his heart and hearkened not unto them as the Lord had said. The frogs are gone. The stench is gone. Whew, I can breathe again. Disregard. Y'all just keep making bricks. It's over. But it ain't over. It's just begun. Y'all ready for the next one? All right, the next one is the plague of lice. I like this one. Now, the lice, understand this, the word also means gnat. So whether it was lice like I think probably it was gnats, because the word means the same thing, okay? lice, gnats. The gnats would make more sense than just lice, wouldn't it? All right. So the Egyptian god Seb and the earth god was judged. Their imagery was of large flying insects. So the gnats make more sense. All right. So when you look at the pictures, if you go online and look at the pictures of their earth gods, and especially Seb and stuff, they have partial human features, partial winged features. By the way, don't you see that in the book of Revelation? We see these creatures coming back to earth, don't we? Oh, yeah. And some of them have stingers, and they sting men, yeah. So here's this plague of lice or gnats, whatever it was. After this comes the flies, which makes sense because of the disgusting of all these dead insects. Anyway, so there was a respite. How long? We don't know. Long enough for the frogs to rot, go away, and the stench be gone. There's no more evidence of frogs. That's done. All of a sudden now God says to Moses, go hit him again, boy. And he's going in again. And the Lord said to Moses, say unto Aaron, stretch out thy rod and smite the dust of the land, that it may become lice, gnats, we're not sure, throughout all the land of Egypt. And the magicians did so with their enchantment. Now some say, King James says lice, therefore it's lice. Well, even in early American culture, gnats were called lice because they landed on you and bit you, and it tingled all over your body like head lice does on your head. You ever see a kid with lice? You ever get a whole bunch of gnats on you? Same doggone thing. There you go. All right. And the magicians did so with their enchantments. They brought forth more of these things. Look, all of a sudden, here it is. We can bring forth bugs. Well, I can bring forth bugs too. No big deal. No big deal. But notice what happens. The magicians did so with their enchantments, their sorcery, their magic, to bring forth lice, but they could not. We can do it too. No big deal. Watch this. We can do it too. No big deal. Watch this. I think we can do it too. Watch this. You better not watch this. We can't do it. I don't know why we can't do it. Do you realize that the way that's phrased in there is that apparently at one time they could do these things, but all of a sudden their power is leaving? They have no power. Have y'all read the book of Revelation? Have you noticed how the Antichrist starts off with peace, then great power, and then he starts to lose his power, and the world starts fighting against him? Have you noticed that? At one time, the Antichrist seems to be ruling the whole world. And he does so with a false peace. But after a while, even his own kingdom starts to fight against him because he doesn't have the power to stop all this crazy stuff that's coming on the world. Is that not amazing? So understand, there's a parallel here. Why is there not more written about the lice? Why isn't there more written? I don't know. You would think that would be a big one, wouldn't you? But it's not. It's like, oh, by the way. Look at verse 19. Then a magician said to Pharaoh, this is the finger of God. That's a capital G. They were acknowledging the God of Moses. We can't. We could, but we can't. Why can't you? Because your power is gone from you. You can't do what you used to do. You've lost it. And Pharaoh's heart was hardened. Isn't that interesting? Now look here. The last time Pharaoh's heart was hardened, there was a pile of frogs. They stunk. After a while, the stench was gone. Then his heart got hardened. Now, his heart gets hardened because his people couldn't do the same thing. It's anger. It's pride. It's arrogancy. And all of a sudden now Moses did something that his people can't do. And instead of acknowledging Moses, acknowledging God, he just got mad. Do you not see that? He just got angry. His heart got hardened. You're not going out of here. You're not going to go worship your God. And even those magicians had to acknowledge they had no power to do this, and it has to be by the finger. And notice that phraseology, the finger of God. Where do you see the finger of God at work in the Bible? Where do you see it? The finger of God is going to be very prevalent later on when He writes the Ten Commandments in stone. A little later on, you're going to see a woman who's caught in adultery. And there's a whole bunch of accusers, and the finger of God writes in the dirt. What did He write in the dirt? Who knows? Probably the Ten Commandments. He could have wrote what he wrote when he came against Nebuchadnezzar. Mene, mene, tekel upharsin. His finger wrote on the wall. You've been weighed. You've been weighed and found lacking. Judgment, right? It's important we understand what they're saying. Where did the lice come from? Come on. Out of the what? Out of the what? Out of the what? Dust. Out of the dust of the earth. Here's the context, and we miss this. In Egypt, as they worshiped all these things and all these gods, these creatures that came, this swarm, the locusts would come at certain times of the year. All these things came at certain times of the year. They came in on the wind. So the wind would bring them out of the desert into Egypt, and then the wind would shift and blow them out of Egypt back into the wilderness, and they would come in on a whirlwind. Have you ever seen a whirlwind? What does it do? It writes in the dust. It picks the dust up. It swirls the dust. This is what these magicians are saying. That was the finger of God. It was unusual. It was the finger of God in the dirt that brought forth these lice. And they acknowledged it was unusual. Please don't miss that, because they worshiped these gods that brought these winds, that brought these whirlwinds, that brought the bugs, and that took the bugs away in season. And this obviously is out of season. It's out of turn. And it's the finger of God. Isn't that cool? All right. So I'm going to mark us here, and we're going to start. Where am I at next? Swarm of flies. Oh, that's a good one too. So we will start in chapter 8, verse 20 next week. Anybody got any questions? Do y'all find this as fascinating as I do? I think it's fascinating. Yes, sir. That was the power of God. Yeah, the protection, that's providential protection of God. It's just like us. You ain't going to die till God's ready for you to die. You want to go skydiving, go skydiving. You want to ride motorcycles, ride motorcycles. You want to do something dangerous, go do something dangerous. You ain't going to die till God's ready for you to die. Now, you can prolong that by jumping in front of a big truck. Skydiving without a parachute, you understand. You go along with the laws of nature, amen. Gravity is still a law of nature. That's given to us by God. You don't go against that. You understand what I'm saying, right? But you ain't going to die till God says you to die. Stop living in fear, people. You live until you die. When you die, we get to go be with Jesus. It's providential protection of God. Yes, sir.
I should have said when you started with the serpents, you think it has a parallel to the seraphim?
I do. I do. I think both the snakes and these, the winged creatures, the gnats, I think they have something. There's something there's in a spiritual reference, but I can't put it together.
Like he broke down the Pharaoh's first guardianship.
Right. Correct. And so it's an invasion of that. So it's very possible. There's a lot more in the spiritual realm here and in imagery than you and I can comprehend. Because let's be honest, we don't even think that way, do we? We're very black and white, tangible. And so a lot of these things and a lot of these symbols we don't get. And the other thing is, not coming from a Jewish background, we don't have a Jewish understanding of the Old Testament. We can learn as much as we can learn, but not growing up in it, being saturated in that Jewish mindset, we miss a lot. I mean, we can study the Bible, we can learn the Bible, but we do miss a lot. And I believe a lot of that, especially when you're dealing with those angels and things that was taught so deeply to the Jewish people, is not found much in the New Testament church. And the reason it's not found much in the New Testament church, we shy away from the spiritual stuff that appears mystical that we can't make black and white because it confuses us. And we also have to remember we are of at least most of us probably in here, are of a Roman mindset or a Greek mindset. We're very factual, tangible based people. And so when we start talking about the mystical, we get either confused or spooked by it. Right? Yeah. Good question, man. Anybody else? All right, we are 2 minutes early. Don't ever anybody say we don't get out early at Sunday school. Anyhow, you guys, I will see you this evening. And we're going to be, where are we in Sunday night? Hebrews, chapter number 1. Yeah, so that's where we are tonight. All right, who'd like to pray and dismiss us? Anybody want to volunteer? Thank you, brother.